Last fall, adventure arose in the unpredictable way that the best kinds of adventures do. My sister bought a new car in California and needed to road trip it back to where she lives in New Orleans, and she invited me to tag along. We didn't have much of a plan aside from a general route and a few scattered ideas of places to visit along the way. But our main points of interest were as follows: cool rocks, abandoned places, and weird shit. Things were off to a good start. And yet, the winds of unplanned adventure were already taking us to unexpected places. The frigid desert evening sent us to seek shelter at this horror video game cabin, which is a first-come, first-served sanctuary for explorers and an abundance of little desert mice. There is something beautifully brutal about a cold desert. The wind howled all night, rattling the windows of the cabin while the mice scurried about on their nightly errands. The sun lured us outside to bask in its promised warmth, but the air was still bitter from last night's storm. As neither of us live in particularly cold climates, it was a bit of a shock to our systems. I did do a little vlog here, but it ended up being the only time I ever spoke to the camera on this trip, and all I really talked about was how cold it was and the fact that we weren't really following a plan. It's super cold though, as you can probably see by my outfit. But we were having a fun time, and that's all that really matters. However, our next destination was pre-planned and high on the priority list: the Salton Sea. We camped on the beach as trains passed by in the night. The Salton Sea is the largest body of water in California, but its creation was pure human accident. In the early 1900s, an irrigation canal was breached by an influx of water from the Colorado River, and it began flooding into this desert basin, forming the sea. The canal was repaired, but the sea continues to be fed by irrigation runoff from nearby farms. But what was once a beautiful accident has now become an ecological disaster. The irrigation runoff is poisoning the water, and the wildlife that has become dependent on the sea is in critical danger. The whole area has become a major health hazard, and many of those who sought out the sea as a paradise have since abandoned it. But a small community of people remains here, enjoying the freedom a place like this can offer. You can almost hear the ticking of the doomsday clock echoing across the sand. In recent years, less and less water has been diverted into the sea, causing it to shrink at an alarmingly fast rate. Exposing the contaminated dusty earth below, the wind kicks up toxic particles, poisoning the air. If the sea continues to shrink, this could have dire effects for all of Southern California. It's just one more ecological disaster to add to the list, but I hope that even just spreading awareness of what's going on out here is the first step in the right direction to saving the sea. Even though the energy of the Salton Sea was pulling us in, we needed to continue on our journey. As fun as road trips are in seeing a ton of places, you don't always get to absorb a place as much as you might want to, especially if you're trying to get to a specific destination within a certain time frame. Working with the short November days was an unexpected challenge on this trip, especially when the desert gets so cold when the sun goes down. On our first night in Arizona, we wild camped next to a small cemetery. What could have been a rather spooky night was actually quite peaceful. It's funny because I never really considered myself a desert person. But when the hills and the clouds are dusted in pink, I feel it drawing me in. The desert is a truly magical place. As we ventured farther north, we felt an even stronger, entrancing pull towards the changing landscape. The red rocks. Leading up to this trip, I felt an indescribable force drawing me to this terrain. I leaned out the window as we drove along the mountain roads, marveling at the fiery sunset cast upon the rocks. Unlike our cemetery camp spot, our next wild camp destination felt most definitely haunted. Maybe it was the scraggly trees that were losing their leaves for winter, or my sister's new ski mask that we found at a thrift store, but there was something a bit unsettling about this forest. The next day, we took a side quest to a volcanic cave. As cool as it was, the adventure didn't last long. We got deep enough into the cave to where you couldn't see any more sunlight, and we were like, well, this is kind of terrifying. So we tapped out and decided to go somewhere a bit more friendly.
That's scary.
If you like weird shit and you're on your way to the south entrance of the Grand Canyon, boy do I have a recommendation for you. This is Raptor Ranch. They have dinosaur stuff, animals, and a crusty Flintstones theme park. Lake loved this place, but it kind of made me feel a little bit weird inside. Like it feels like the setting of some of my childhood nightmares. I can't fully put my finger on it, but it's a weird place, and that's exactly what we were hoping to see on this trip. The first time I visited the Grand Canyon, I was 12 years old, and I think it was the first time I experienced derealization. I remember looking at the canyon and not being able to process that it was real and I was there looking at it. Maybe my eyes weren't used to having to comprehend that much vastness and depth of a landscape. It almost feels like a hologram or a screen. I feel this way about a lot of places now, and I think it's because I spend too much time looking at actual screens, but back then, I didn't even have a phone, so I don't know exactly why I felt that way back then. Maybe this place just has that effect on people. It must be all the striped layers of rocks here and the canyons carved out by rivers that really make you think about the passage of time. In a place like this, it feels as if every moment in time that has ever passed here is layered together, existing all at once in parallel timelines. Half the time, I expected to turn the corner and see a dinosaur walk by, but then I remembered how grotesquely the roads cut through the landscape, and I'm reminded that not every timeline is a peaceful one. It's hard to ignore all the violence and greed that has made this road trip even possible. I am, of course, referring to the murder and displacement of the indigenous people that lived on these lands before us, lands that have been forcibly carved out for tourism. Our history weighs heavy, and it makes one feel helpless as the future continues to spiral forward in unpredictable ways. But in times like this, despite all these feelings of disconnect and chaos, I think about the commonalities of the experience of being alive on Earth. It doesn't matter if you're a dinosaur or a bug or shrub or human. We have all shared the same sun, moon, stars, and Earth for as long as all these parallel timelines have existed. And that brings me some form of solace. Speaking of time, it's hard to wrap my head around the fact that we are lucky enough to exist in this exact moment on Earth and witness this. To think that in the billions of years the Earth has been around, amidst ever-changing tectonic plates, constant erosion from water and weather, the exact position of the sun, the evolution of life, has all led to this near impossible moment of us standing here right now, seeing these sick-ass rocks. And to think one day this whole area will be unrecognizable due to further erosion. So how lucky are we that we get to coincide with this impossibly stunning landscape as it exists in this fleeting moment of cosmic time. Utah was certainly satisfying our craving to see some cool rocks. Dare I say, probably the coolest rocks we had ever seen in our lives. Our drive through the southwestern part of the state was one of our favorite driving days of the trip, so I wanted to take a step back from the narration and immerse you in our experience.
Look at these fucking rocks, dude.
Dude, that's a lot of rocks.
Whoa. Yo. Damn. So sweet. This is healing me. Wow.
In my increasingly disdained attitude towards tourism, I have to admit that I have a tough time truly enjoying myself at national parks because of how crowded they can be. And yes, I do acknowledge that I am part of the problem by also being here, but I also don't think that staying away and never seeing some of the most beautiful parts of Earth is the answer either. When the crowds get intense, I have to remind myself why we're all here. You look around and see people that are hundreds, if not thousands of miles from their homes, and realize that they came all the way out here to see some rocks. And that simple fact makes me feel better about our shared experience at these crowded parks. We are just creatures of the earth, after all, seeking to appreciate the beauty of our planet. As much as people like to say we've fallen out of touch with nature, I truly believe that the instinct to explore, to marvel, and appreciate the natural beauty of our world is within all of us, so long as we're willing to feel it. And so, it's my most sincere hope that we continue to see the importance of protecting these lands and the wildlife that reside here, to respect the people that lived here before us and the ones that still fight to conserve this land. We're so lucky to be here for this fleeting moment of time, and we shouldn't ever take that for granted. And that was the peak of our car camping road trip in the southwestern US. After Arches, we had many long days of driving and not much sightseeing to do on the rest of our drive to New Orleans. I didn't film a whole lot by the end, so let me quickly catch you up on the rest of the journey. As we headed into Colorado and New Mexico, we hit snow. We had to reroute several times to avoid the worst of it, as we were not prepared to handle the slippery roads. We made it to Taos, where we stayed with a lovely new friend that showed us around town and took us to the most amazing hot springs along the Rio Grande. And then, Oklahoma and Texas. I will say they have some great thrifting here, but otherwise we didn't stay too long. And then, of course, this is how our last day ended up going, but a very long story short, everything worked out and we were able to hit the road again and make it to New Orleans later that night. I spent the next few days in the city having some adventures with Lake and her friends, and then I hopped on the plane to go back to California. In total, we were on the road for about 2 weeks and drove through 8 states. It's amazing how specifically the stars had to align for this journey to happen, and I'm forever grateful that they did. So the moral of the story is, when adventure calls, don't hesitate to pick up. We exist to experience the world. So, what are you waiting for?